This lesson is on skin blurring. Now, I've gone in and I've retouched all of the major bumps in this girl's face on a separate retouch layer. If I had actually gone in and had really overdone it, I could just lower the opacity of this layer, but I don't need to. Everything's fine. Now, I'm going to give you a keyboard shortcut here that what I want to do is I want to have a new layer on top of my layer stack that combines all the layers below it. And I actually first learned about this keyboard shortcut from Jim DiVitale, and I'm not sure where Jim got it from, but it's really handy. And I have to use two hands, and maybe even occasionally call in a friend to help me do this. It's Shift, Option, Command, E. And if you're a PC user, it's Shift, Control, Alt, E. And that brings all of your layers below onto a new layer at the very top of the layer stack. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this layer Blur. And I'm going to go in and go up to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur. And I really just want to exaggerate this. I want it to really kind of wipe out any little flaw that might be in the skin and not worry too much about what it's doing to the rest of the image. So I'm actually going to do what would be considered a fairly high radius for this. I'm going to leave it at about 5 pixels. Let me play around with the threshold here. Now, threshold on Surface Blur works a little bit different than it does on other dialog boxes where you see threshold. On this one, the lower you go, the less it's blurred. Okay, that looks good. Just going to leave it right there. Click on OK. And now I have a nice blurry image. I'm going to tell you another little keyboard shortcut to make this a little easier for yourself. As I go to add that layer mask, the layer mask button down here, I'm going to hold down the Option key. On the PC, it's the Alt key. Click on Add Layer Mask. And my layer mask comes in now in black so that it has, it's hiding all of that blurry that I added before. And actually, if you worked with me on the skin tone part of this project down here on this layer, I already have a layer mask where I've already started painting in just on the skin, and that's really all I need. So I can actually just steal this layer mask down here. If I click on the Alt or Option key, I could just click and drag that layer mask and have it replace this one up here. And so now it's only affecting, that blur is only affecting just the skin and nothing else in the image. And just to make sure, I'll go in and really make sure that the eyes are not being affected by it all by painting black over them. So make sure that my foreground color is black down here. It is. Paint with a nice soft brush, make it a little bit smaller than this. And just go over like the eyebrows, make sure that those are going to be nice and sharp. Make sure the eyes are nice and sharp. Make sure the nostrils, lips, and let me just turn that layer off and on just to see how. Yeah, it seems to be just affecting the skin. Now I'm just going to lower the opacity a little bit here. Take it down. Let's go down to 50%. So you're still seeing a little bit of the texture through that blur, but she is starting to look a little plastic. But that's okay, because I'm going to go in and add a fake texture to cheat on this. And let's do that now. I'm going to do that same keyboard shortcut I did before, which makes a composite layer at the top of my layer stack here. Shift, Option, Command, E, or on the PC, Shift, Alt, Control, E. That brings a composite of all the layers before at the very top of the layer stack. And this is the layer that I'm going to add my fake texture to. And I'm actually going to name it Texture. Now, I have given you a file that you're going to use, and first of all, let me show you where how you're going to load it. And it'll be in your downloads folder, and it'll be under textures. But we're going to go up here to Filter, and then Texture, and then Texturizer. It sounds like something you'd do to a steak, doesn't it? But no, it's so that's Filter, Texture, Texturizer. And that brings up this giant dialog box, which is fine. Now, over here, there's this little flyout menu where it says Texture, Canvas, and then this little button here. You'll click on it, and it'll bring up this little menu where it says Load Texture. Click on that, because we're going to load in your Downloads folder. There's a folder called Textures. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to load DC's skin texture.psd. Click on Load, and what that texture file actually is, a big patch of skin that I went in and completely retouched the correct way, and did it very, very detailed, so it's a nice, really clean patch of skin. Now, the problem is that skin texture varies, especially on the face. It's more noticeable. The skin texture of the forehead is actually different than what the skin texture you see on the cheeks or on the nose or on the chin. But the biggest difference is that the forehead skin always looks so much different than any other part of the face. So we're going to use the same skin texture for everything, but I'm just going to change it by playing around with these controls right down here. So right now, all I'm trying to do is make a natural looking skin texture for this girl's forehead. And I found that if I always play with the light of the texturizer, it's supposed to be which direction the light is coming from, going over the texture, it really does a good job of simulating the different types of texture you'll find on the face. And I found that if I have this set to top, it really gives me a good fake look. I shouldn't say fake. Gives me a good proximity of skin texture on the forehead. And that's what I'm going to use. And you can play around with these buttons here. If you increase the relief, it's going to make that texture really strong, and we don't want it that strong, obviously. Scaling will actually kind of change the size of the pores, and we don't want the scaling to be too exaggerated either. So let me take that down, and I'm going to take that down to 71%. And put the relief at 8. That's a little bit strong, but that's okay, because we can adjust the opacity of that layer. Click on OK, and now I have new layer, texture layer, where I've created a forehead texture for her. And actually, let me just amend the name of this layer so that we don't get confused later. I'm just going to add the word forehead to it, because that's really all I'm using this first layer for is the forehead. So let me go ahead and add a layer mask to it, and I want it again to be a black layer mask. So I'm going to go down here to my layer mask button at the bottom of the layers palette, hold down the Alt or the Option key and click, and it gives me a black layer mask that I can then go in and paint white on. So let me make sure that my background and foreground color are set to their defaults. So I'm now painting with white. Let me click the paintbrush, and just a nice big soft round brush, hardness all the way down. That's good. And I'm just going to go in and paint. You can see that none of those bumps that were there before are showing up, but the skin texture is, and it's actually a little bit strong. So I'm just going to back off the opacity of the layer. I can see this real clearly on my monitor here. I hope you can as you watch this video. But the skin texture looks a lot more natural if I were to just reduce the opacity of that layer a little bit. Let's take it down to like 50%. Good. Okay, so that's after, that's before. Before, it looks a little plasticky. After, it has some texture to it. Now, you're going to have to play with this on your monitor, because watching a compressed video I'm sure that some of this detail is disappearing that you're looking at. So now we're going to do this again. This time I'm going to do that same keyboard shortcut, Shift, Option, Command E, making a composite layer. And now I'm going to do a texture that's just for the lower part of the face, the cheeks, the chin, the nose, and such. And let's just name this Texture Lower Face. And let's go up to Filter, Texture, Texturizer. And we still have DC's skin texture loaded, but I'm going to change, for her lower face, I'm going to change the light direction. And I'm going to change it, do it from the right. And you can see that now the texture of her skin, the pores look a little more round here on the cheeks. They look a little more natural. You could also play around with this if you wanted to, and you could create a different texture zone for each part of the face. But right now we're just going to use this one for the entire lower part of the face. And let's just play around with the scaling a little bit here, see what that does. Take that down again. Look at the relief setting. The relief setting will make it a little bit stronger. I'm going to make it a little bit strong because, again, I'm going to go back in and change the opacity of the layer to adjust that. I'm going to click on OK. And that's before, a little bit plastic looking. After, there's lots of texture. But, of course, the texture is everywhere, so we need to add a black layer mask. Again, go down to the Layer Mask button, click on Alt or Option, and zap. We have a black layer mask hiding the texture that we just added. Let me go in here, and now I'm going to paint with a nice soft white brush again, and I'm just going to add the texture back in on the cheeks. So there you can see I'm not getting any of the funny skin bumps, no zits or anything, but lots of texture. And obviously, I can actually use this for the nose, although it's a little strong for the nose. So I'm going to go back in and paint over that with my brush. I'll show you here in just a sec. I'm just going to paint everywhere on her lower face just to get that texture. Okay. Now I'm going to just reverse. I'm going to hit the X key so that my foreground color is now black. And I'm going to change the opacity of my brush, which actually I can do here, or I can just hit one of my number keys on my keyboard. I'm going to hit the number 5, and the opacity goes down to 50%. So I'm now going to be painting back with black, so I'm actually going to be hiding some of this texture again. A little bit bigger brush. Going to go over the nose because that texture is a little too much for the nose. There we go. That's pretty good. It's a little too much also for the chin down here. There we go. And it is for the upper lip as well. Good. Okay. And then I'm also just going to lower the opacity of this layer a little bit. Good. I think that looks good. Okay. Let me back out here. Oh, if you double click the hand tool, it'll make your image fit to screen for you. Okay. Let's just take a look down here. Everything we've done so far. So everything we've done so far is this that you're looking at right now, and this is before. So that's the original. That's with all that sunburned skin and a few zits here and there.